All right, so we should be live now. Running a few minutes behind today. I'll let you guys take a minute to find the stream, and when you get here, if you can just let me know if the visuals and the sound are working. And I'm gonna pull up the stream here. Hey, you said booyah. All right, people are coming on in. Hey, Ian John, Highly Blessed, Flippin' Eddie, Jeremy Judkins, Thrifty, Pocket Monster Dom, HTWA, Ricardo, nice to see all of you guys. Thanks for being here today. Yeah, hope everyone is having a good Sunday afternoon or morning or evening or night, depending on where you're watching this from. It's a pleasure to be back with you guys on our usual Sunday time. All right. So just let me know if the sound and the visuals and everything's okay. We dropping rates or anything? I think it looks like it's going all right. So the plan for today is to go through the Patreon questions. Visual seems to be a little bit off. Let's see if I can fix it. Let's see if that fixes it. Bear with me, guys, just having a little bit of technical difficulties. Someone says they can hear a fan. That might be the sound of the computer. It's a little bit hot today. I do have a few windows up that I'm closing, which will hopefully help. Eventually, I will get, you know, a more professional streaming setup as I run the channel longer and the channel becomes more successful. That's the type of thing that I've been adding. As you guys know, I've added a camera and a microphone, and we'll continue to add stuff. All right. Okay. Picture still looks a little bit choppy to me. I'm not sure what you guys are seeing. My computer's running a bit slow today. All right, so it looks like probably people have, most people have jumped in and joined by now. So thanks again so much, guys, for hanging out. I hope everyone is having a good Sunday. And let's jump into the first Patreon question. Blue Ghost Collectible says there's some lag, a couple frames here and there, but it's all good. Yeah, I don't know why my computer's struggling so much today. I'm messing around with a couple of things, hoping that it will help, but I'm not sure it will. Most people are saying that it looks and sounds pretty good, which I'm glad about. Some people are saying a lot of lag. Well, what do you guys think? Is it worth it? Is it good enough that we should continue, or should I restart the stream? Let me know what it's looking like for people. Audio is fine, a little bit of lag. And some people are saying it's not. Okay, so let's go. Audio is fine, good enough. Totally fine to proceed, it's good here. Okay, thank you guys. All right, let's do it. Let's jump into some Patreon questions. So first question today, there's something I've been thinking about that I wanted to hear your thoughts on. I wonder what long-term effects and opportunity costs today's hype and greed will have on very young collectors, not just with the health of TCG hobbies, but with the general psychology of kids' experiences. Yeah, so I don't know, is the honest truth. I think that my response is that I think people are assuming a lot right now about what kids think about the hobby and what effect it's going to have on kids in the long term. And I don't think that there's any way to accurately predict what all of this mania, and largely driven by adults, is, what effect that's going to have on kids and have on future generations of Pokemon collectors. So I think that it's very speculative, and so I think with that speculative nature, it's not great to assume that this is going to be a huge era of kids joining the hobby, and that these kids are going to love the cards in 20 to 30 years just as much as we love the cards now. I don't think it's good to assume that strength. I also don't think it's good to assume that that isn't going to happen, or argue against that. I think likely there's going to be a lot of new kids interested in the hobby. The fact that I think adults are interested in, speaking very speculatively, I think adults are getting their kids involved. I think adult Pokemon collectors are collecting with their kids, which are creating wonderful memories. I think that those things will be passed on and will be very cherished. I think as far as the psychology of the kids, or what the kids are experiencing, I think when adults really want something, it could make a kid not want something and think it's lame, or it could make a kid really want something, because if adults really want it, I look up to adults, and my parents are my idols, and I whatever they're interested in or whatever they think has value, I think has value too, and it gets stored and encoded that way. I think it depends on the age. I think generally younger children, preteens, are generally idolize their parents and idolize adult sort of figures in their lives, in terms of viewing them and looking to them to tell them what they should like, what they should do, what they should enjoy, that sort of thing. And then that really shifts over the years to peers. And oftentimes what adults are interested in or what adults are doing doesn't really matter. So trying to guess all of that's going to be pretty difficult. But I think there's definitely going to have a big positive effect that adults are collecting with their kids. I think another potential positive effect in terms of prices is that all of this hype and excitement, and the fact that kids can't get some of these cards, can create just more wanting the cards, which when Pokemon does print enough product, or kids grow up and they have more money to actually afford these things, they may come back and buy some of these modern items that they can't get today because there's just not enough supply, or because the prices are just way too high due to the secondary market. So those are some of my thoughts on it. In terms of the frustration for kids and for parents, that's very real for a number of people, particularly people who really they're not interested in the financial aspects of this hobby, and they just want to cheaply collect in a fun way with their kids, and buy their kids stuff that makes them really happy and excited, and brings joy to their childhood. And I think that's where I get frustrated with the secondary market and the greediness of certain individuals in the secondary market. But there's just not much you can do about that other than wait, and I think have patience. And wait for Pokemon to print more, or for people to stop buying at these higher prices. I think that part of why the additional positive kind of secondary effect I hope that my channel has when I talk about, maybe some of this modern stuff's going to be very heavily printed and it's pretty risky to invest in a lot of it in the long term. The secondary positive effect of that is that maybe people can stop investing in it so much, and more of that product can go to collectors, and more people can just have some of it rather than certain people needing to buy all of it, or storing lots and lots of it as a way to hopefully make money in the future, that sort of thing. So I think the state of modern right now, obviously with this like crazy, I'm sure people have questions and we can talk about it, with this crazy news on Target. And this, very poor behavior by people fighting over Pokemon cards, threatening each other. Obviously, there's a lot broader socioeconomic issues at play, and struggles and challenges going on in some people's lives that likely drive those individuals to behave that way. But it's unfortunate that it's affecting the Pokemon card market. I think those stories are probably fairly unusual, but I definitely wouldn't want my kids involved in any sort of dangerous, threatening hobby, and I would want my kids to be involved in, a wholesome, fun hobby that teaches them good values and has good art and has good community and friendships and those sorts of things. So, and I think with Target closing, it's gonna affect, unfortunately, maybe some of the kids who try to buy from Target. So it's we're gonna see. I mean, maybe they're just gonna take a break from Pokemon and they'll come back at some point to it. This might be a permanent thing. I don't have any insider answers into that. I do think that in the long run everything will be fine. I think it's a matter of no one thing is going to dramatically negatively alter the Pokemon hobby, something like that, for the foreseeable future. I don't think. It would have to be pretty major. I'm not sure if that's going to be significant enough or major enough. That being said, it could have long-lasting ramifications on prices, and clearly if these stores stop selling for cheaply, it'll be interesting to see what effect that has on prices. Does that mean that you can no longer get things at all cheaply and everything goes up in price? Does it mean that scalpers leave the hobby and things come down a little bit, or it's easier to find product, and maybe if we pay a little bit higher at LGSs, scalpers can no longer scalp product and then flip it? Probably not going to have an effect on that. But to be real, right, it's the fact that they can sell it so cheaply, so below market, because they're forced to sell it below market at Walmart and Target because of their business model and their agreements with the distributors and the Pokemon Company. That's what creates all this incentive for the scalpers to triple the value, right? Because they can to buy out all the product because they can triple their value on the cards. If they were going to LGS stores who are already charging secondary market price in a lot of cases, they wouldn't be able to buy that and then flip it. That being said, it wouldn't solve the issue for people looking to get cheap product, because the LGS stores would likely still sell it at the higher rate. And maybe if the LGS stores got more of the product, they could slightly lower it. But then if they lower it too much, it's just the scalpers will go to the LGSs. So there's really no solution outside of just having more product, I think. And people seeing a lot of those cards come back from PSA, which will hurt the prices of a lot of this product, and it'll be obvious that there's a lot of this, and maybe this stuff isn't as investable as people thought, and a number of people will leave the hobby because of that, and things will become better. I know I love the Pokemon hobby. It's I love so many different card hobbies, and I would just preach patience and being kind to each other. You know, it's kind of what I always try to say on this channel. You know, speak the truth and stand up to things that you see are wrong, but you know, try to do it in the least force necessary, and just kind of be patient, kind. Remember to always come from that place of like you really care about the Pokemon community and you want everyone here to succeed and have a good time, and you'll be a good member, and you'll help things move in a positive direction. All right. So there were some other personal thoughts shared in that Patreon post. I'm not sure if you wanted me to share that or mainly just share the gist of your question. You know, and then you asked specifically here, you know, what is the psychology for kids who go to the store and see no product again and again? And I don't know. You know, I think it could be one of two things. One, it could make them want it more, right? And as I said before, when they become adults, they're going to go back and want to collect that, or it could make them give up and move on to a different hobby and then never be connected with the hobby in the first place. So I don't know, you know, it's probably going to do some of that for, you know, depending on the kid. I think also it depends on how much the kid's connected to Pokemon through other ways, through the video games, through these other sorts of things, which it may just build up that more demand. But it's a great question. It's a great question. I think my answers will wait and see. But when we think about investing, it creates risk. It creates variables that are hard to predict. And so you have to factor that into the risk. Okay. All right. Next question. It seems like the market has been in discovery mode for the past few months, moving from one Pokemon set to another. Most recently, the Japanese market seems to have benefited a lot from that. Do you have any idea what era and set interest might shift onto next? That's the first question. No, I mean, I have ideas. That's going to be the kind of private Patreon Q&A where we would talk more in depth about my specific ideas about what specific cards or sets might move up next. On this channel, we talk more just about fundamentals and overall trends. You know, and even on the Patreon, it's going to be a highly speculative answer, just based on what I'm seeing, what my opinion is, and none of my opinions are going to be able to be taken, you know, as gospel. I think that the way you're thinking about it is smart, which is, as an investor, you are always trying to think about, you know, what hasn't moved yet, where is the attention, and where's the attention going to move next, that sort of thing. I think oftentimes in the Pokemon hobby, though, it's a little bit more like there are probably 5 to 10 different categories that are worth investing in. And I would pick the one where there seems to be the least attention. So I would pick the one where there's a lot of really good fundamentals, but you don't see a lot of people hyping those up. Or you feel like the fundamentals of this section are just as good as the fundamentals of that section. And when we talk about fundamentals, we talk about, you know, the easiest way, you know, and I made a whole video on this, and there's a lot more than just this, but, you know, S. Imprats, older rare mint or better is an excellent just shorthand thing to repeat to yourself if you're buying something for an investment. There's also other things like, you know, the nature of the release, how historic it is, the subjectivity of the art, the type of Pokemon. You know, there are certainly other things that saying doesn't grab, but that's a good saying and a good starting point to ask when you try to pick the next thing. And your second question is, I know it is difficult, if not impossible, to predict the future, but if you had to take a guess, where do you see the prices for base set settling at? Do you think we'll reach an early 2020 price floor? Or do you think we could see a drop even past that back to 2019 level prices? Yeah, so I don't know, right? I think that things in the 7, 8, 9 PSA category and things in the, particularly for unlimited, there's going to be so much more supply coming back that's going to have to be absorbed. So we're going to need more demand in order to keep the prices up, which may or may not happen. So I think that's going to be tricky for those prices to hold. In terms of retracing all the way back to 2019 prices, I think that they could retrace back to 2019 or even lower. I just think it's very unlikely. The only way they could retrace all the way back to 2019 prices is if it's kind of a perfect storm in the other way, where people, COVID ends, people leave their houses. There's a lot of macroeconomic effects. There's mass unemployment. There's, massive issues with, where people just aren't spending on collectibles anymore, combined with a huge amount more supply coming back from PSA, combined with, I think the way to think about it is that the prices that we had before this boom were extremely solid in 2019. They were pretty stable for like 2 whole years, roughly. Things moved a little up and down, mostly up, but we're talking like 10 to 20% up in 2 to 3 years, which is just like a really solid, nice growth and nice return, right? I feel very good about those price points. The problem is because prices have gone up so rapidly, and so many more people have heard about Pokemon, and so many more people are in Pokemon now to make money potentially and not to collect. We're gonna have to see how all that settles. There's so many people decided to grade cards, and probably grade a lot of cards that they shouldn't have graded this early. We should have waited for another 5 to 10 to 20 years for a lot of these cards to age before people started grading them. And that way it would have made those cards much, much more valuable in the long run, because less would have survived in mint condition, and less would be all graded at once, and less would flood the market all at once. But because there's a lot of, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but greed or people wanting to make money, that's not necessarily greed. Making money isn't greed. Greed is making probably more than you need. So that's not greed. Take that back. But just a lot of people interested in making money, and making money quickly and becoming rich in some cases quick, rather than kind of being patient and having a long-term game plan with some of the stuff. People sent out huge submissions of modern, lots and lots of people particularly, but also vintage, tons and tons of base set, to answer your question, particularly unlimited, but also first edition. And because of that, we're gonna see a lot of these pop reports double, triple, quadruple, 10x, 100x in certain cases. And the question is, how much of a market demand is there, right? And the prices that things are at right now are based on the amount of cards in supply and the amount of demand. And if the demand increases 100 times, then there needs to be the supply increases 100 times, and there needs to be 100 times the amount of demand, right? And money to buy up those cards to keep it at the same price. So that's just supply and demand. So that's why we could see huge retraces on certain things. It's part of why I talk about how important rarity is, because you're not going to see the prices that are being established right now for certain items that are very rare. You're not going to see a lot more of those items hit the market. So you're not going to have to worry about more money going into that to keep them up. So I think in the long run, even if there's extreme growing pains, what this will provide is excellent buying opportunities if things dip extremely far. So I think that once all this stuff gets out, and if prices dip really low, particularly on a lot of the things I like to invest in or buy or collect, yeah, it'll be a good time to potentially buy. And then as more and more people feel that way, more and more of that supply will continue to get absorbed at those low prices, and prices will start to recover and slowly go up. So that's what you have to look at. In terms of when that's going to happen, nobody knows. I'd give you a better idea if I knew what PSA was doing, right? If I knew how quickly PSA was coming back with orders. I know that they're starting to get through orders like from August of last year. And there were a lot of orders sent in over the summer, so that's great. They're making a lot of progress and getting a lot back right now. But obviously, there's a huge amount more coming once Logan Paul did his thing, particularly around base set. A lot of stuff was sent in around there in October, November. And then I think modern, I think a lot of the modern, maybe even the majority of the modern, was only sent even more recently, particularly around evolutions, because only after evolution saw the huge price spike did people start sending in bulk all the evolutions. So it's going to take a long time for that stuff to come back out. And will it flood back out? How will it be absorbed by the market? How much demand will there be? There could be some dangerous scenarios where things do go pre-2019 prices on certain cards. I don't think it will, if I had to guess, but there are scenarios. And there are people who say that it's not possible, and that isn't true. So you just have to be aware of it. All right, so hopefully that's helpful. People are greatly underestimating the amount of supply that is going to come into the market versus the amount of supply that's ever been in the market. And that's going to be a true test of the demand, of how much demand is there really for this stuff on the collector side, particularly when prices are no longer going up and you can no longer flip and make money. This is exactly what collapsed comic books and sports card market, okay, in the 90s. Okay. Another question here. While the market is hot, does it make sense to buy more vintage raw cards with the idea of grading them and playing more of a numbers game and accumulating them while being more tactical in terms of the vintage graded cards? It seems like the opportunity for great near mint lots or collections is a bit harder than it was in the past. So I think you're asking, does it make sense to buy vintage raw cards with the idea of grading them? So I don't think so right now for the most part. Like, of course, if you're really good at that, you're really skilled, you know what to look for, and you have a really good sense of what cards will grade, there's always money to be made in buying, raw cards, particularly in large lots, grading them, and then flipping them. But it's really hard to do that right now for a variety of reasons, and much worse than it has ever really been over the last few years of Pokemon. That's because of a few things. One, there's a lot more competition, as you say here. There's a lot more people trying to do that, searching out all those mint cards, and there are just fewer and fewer of them left, particularly vintage ones, right? Two, the prices of PSA grading, or BGS or CGC, continues to go up, and or you can't even send to PSA, right? Unless you're sending super expensive. And so you're going to have to wait longer to get your cards back to flip. You're going to have to spend more money to get them graded, which all cuts into the amount of money you're going to make doing that. Okay, so it just really severely cuts down your margin. So there's a lot more competition, and there's a lot more time, waiting to get that back. Now, I think we're going to enter into a buyer's market at some point. Where I think it's going to make more sense to actually just build positions, and then over time prices will rise again, and then you'll be able to sell again. I think that this, like, a lot of the people here are doing those like quick flips, buying a bunch of stuff, grading it, selling it, and auctioning, doing these like slab city, these slab like selling auction type things. I think that market is going to become more saturated, and the prices are going to naturally go lower on those types of things over the next year or so. And so this would kind of be grading to sell to those types of people doing that, and I. Now, that being said, like, I love buying near mint binder cards for fun and for collecting. So that's purely from a investment standpoint. I think right now, from a long-term investment standpoint, I think starting to build up a little bit of cash, spending here and there on certain really good deals, being a bit patient. I always try and buy big, really good deals rather than buying lots and lots of little small deals. That's a better way to spend less time, effort, and make a lot more money. And it also allows you to have a lot of money so that you can buy those really big deals. Often the biggest deals have the best value because when someone's trying to sell $150,000 of cards or $100,000 or even $10,000 of cards, there's just a much smaller buying pool for that. And so you're not competing against as many people, and you can get better deals. Because it requires a lot of effort to break down those big lots. Second part of your question. Also, it seems like a majority of the people with near mint cards are more savvy in terms of researching recent sold prices, and it's harder to get those at 30 to 50% of the potential value if sorted, listed, graded, auction, etc. Yeah. So there's been an interesting history in Pokemon. There have been times when the ungraded cards were undervalued and the graded cards were overvalued. And there have been times when the ungraded cards are overvalued and the graded cards are undervalued. Or I might have just said the same thing twice, or vice versa, as you guys understand, I'm sure. And what I mean by that is that they're generally a mint card should sell between probably like an 8 to 9 value. You know, and if it's very, very mint and gem minty looking, it should sell at like a PSA 9 value. If it's selling for over that, it's probably a bit overvalued, right? And so there were times in this hobby when I was buying PSA 9 slabbed cards for cheaper than mint-looking, raw cards. And now, if the card is like perfect looking, I get it. Particularly if it's a difficult card to grade and you want to just pay up hugely for that PSA 10 chance, and then you want to take that gamble. That I get. But most of the time, it will come back a 9. Particularly if there's a little bit of whitening or a little bit of damage or a little bit of off centering, which 95% of the time is going to be there, or a tiny scratch or tiny surface damage. So paying PSA 9 prices for ungraded cards is generally ridiculous. You're generally way overpaying. So that's just something to keep in mind with that sort of thing. And I think I do see people making that mistake a lot, where they think things are going to grade 10s when they don't, or they think things are going to grade 9s when they actually grade 7s or 8s, and they lose a lot of money. So when I was buying lots, I would try, and really mint-looking lots, I would actually try to pay PSA 8 prices for everything. And that way I would mostly get back 9s. I would get back a few 10s and make a lot of money on the 10s. The 9s I would make some money on. Some of that money would go to the grading fees and the eBay fees and all that sort of stuff. So I would make a little bit of money on the 9s. I'd make a lot of money on the 10s. And I would lose a little bit of money after grading fees, generally on the 8s. Okay? Right, because I'm buying them at PSA 8 prices, then I'm paying the additional grading fee, so I'm losing that grading fee. So that's how I generally think about that stuff. So hopefully all of those answers have been helpful. Thank you so much to the Patreon members. And we have so many new Patreon members. Thank you guys so much. I know a lot of people are really excited about the Q&A, the private Q&As, where we're going to go more in depth into market talk, into specifics. I'm looking forward to it too. I'm still trying to figure out how exactly we're going to do it. All right. Let's see what's happening in the chat here, guys. How's everyone doing? So let's do a few questions, and then I might just hang out with you guys a little bit. Nice to see all of you guys. It's great just seeing the usual crew. Thanks for the congratulations on 5K. We're excited. 5,000 subscribers. It's an amazing milestone. A lot of interesting comments on the on kids, the discussion we were having earlier. A lot of good value here. Definitely reading through the chat for people watching is worthwhile on those discussions. People who watch this channel have a lot of knowledge and share great perspectives. And it's a very speculative question. It's not something that I think anyone should feel confident that they have the answer, or they know what's going to happen. PokeGeekDom, hey there, nice to see you here. And I'll give a little plug for Squeak's Discord. I've been hanging out in there. It's been a lot of fun, and PokeGeekDom's always in there. Great guy. Really enjoy chatting to you. PokeGeekDom says, Jake, with the Japanese Pokemon company moving to release Eevee Heroes via lottery, do you think if supply issues continue, we may ever see that happen in the US? It could. I don't have any insight into that. It's an interesting question. It's the kind of thing where we'll wait and see, right? I don't. I'm not an LGS. I don't work with distributors, so it's not. I have a number of friends who give me information on that type of stuff, but my understanding with the English side has always run so different than the Japanese side, and there's a lot of parties who make a lot of money who are very interested in it running a certain way, and I'm not sure if they would ever change that or how they would change that exactly. But it's an interesting question. A lot of those, like, what are the Pokemon Company going to do type questions, I always just say, I'm not sure. we can't really predict it. Some great comments here about printing. Jeremy Judkins says, not sure if you've already spoken on this, but what is your opinion on Target and most Walmarts no longer carrying Pokemon sports cards will hurt things? Yeah, I mentioned it a little bit. I didn't make a video on it mostly because I felt like Squeaks, for example, made a really good video on it and already covered most of the subjects. I feel very similarly to him on it. So, I try not to make videos that I feel like have already been made, that type of thing. Gosh, it seems like it's very choppy, isn't it? Or is that just my video? It's so irritating. The stream just seems to not be running well today. I'm just going to try and check something to see if I can make it run a little bit better, but it just... struggling. Maybe closing. I have a Discord open. Maybe if I close that, it will help. Let's see if that helps things run a little bit smoother. All right. Okay, gonna head back up to some of the questions here. Hopefully that runs a bit smoother, guys. I think it's a bit better now. PokeKeek Dom says, Jake, you always give great examples of fundamentals. What are some examples of things that aren't fundamentals? That aren't fundamentals, like things that people buy on that aren't fundamentals. One thing that's not a fundamental is basically things related to hype. So things related to like a YouTuber saying something's great but not giving any reasons. So buying something because someone tells you to buy something, that isn't a fundamental. And when we say fundamental, what we actually mean is something intrinsic about the underlying asset that you're buying into. So for example, if this, if this card is an asset, if this is the asset we're talking about, and all this applies to stocks and real estate and everything, someone telling you this is a great buy has nothing to do with the fundamentals of what this card actually is. Now, in the short term, it can have a humongous impact on the market because people are very persuaded by what other people think and by those emotions. But over time, the actual fundamentals, the intrinsic value of the card, you would expect, or value of the company or the real estate property, whatever it is, you would expect people to for the value to match the underlying asset over time, and that in the short term of even in the middle term, if it's a person who has a really big voice and a really persuasive voice, it can have significant effect on the asset. Over the very, very long run, it's going to have less and less of effect over time on average. That's how a value investor thinks about markets, and why. And it's the opposite of a lot of the sort of age of social media mania investing and social media investing that's going on right now. It's the exact opposite. That's very much momentum investing based on, I don't really care, it could be this, right? That has like the worst fundamentals in the hobby, basically. But if, I'm going to invest in this, if everyone starts talking about it and it's the most talked about thing and it's the thing everyone says is going to be great and it starts going up a lot, I'm going to put all my money into it. So that would be an example of all non-fundamental things that affect the market and shift prices. So hopefully that's a great question. Hopefully that helps clarify what I mean when I say fundamentals to people. It's why I talk so much about the danger of, there's something that very much happened this year, which is, there were a lot of people who made certain predictions, and instead of making those predictions on fundamentals and the fundamentals of an item causing that price to rise, what rose the price was hype. And what we're gonna see happen is that the hype is going to come back out of the hobby and out of those cards, and the prices are then going to reflect that and come back down to more of the fundamentals and more of the intrinsic value of that item to collectors, to people. Now, determining the exact intrinsic values of a Pokemon card to the greater Pokemon market is an impossible thing to do, right? With any sort of specific, with any sort of precision, and that's why it's such a risky, thing to invest in buying Pokemon cards, particularly in the short term when you're trying to buy and sell and predict where a market's going to move. There are hundreds of thousands of interested parties and people, and we have no idea exactly how many of the cards are and what condition they're going to be in and when they're going to come back from PSA. Right, the fundamentals aren't obvious and clear for most things, but you still want to try to unearth them as much as you possibly can and sort them out and make decisions when you're thinking just purely financially based on the fundamentals. If you're planning on holding things in the long run, as I've always said on this channel, in the short run, you can make a lot of money doing momentum investing. The problem is you actually have to sell. And most people who momentum invest don't sell. Most people ride the wave up and then they ride the wave down, and they've lost. And usually, and oftentimes it goes lower than where it even first started. And unfortunately, that's going to happen to lots of people in this hobby. And it'll be a learning, lesson for them. It's hard to sell. It's hard to sell at the peak. It's selling at the peak is very, very difficult. Usually people end up selling either sort of like halfway down-ish or all the way down. Or they just try to ride it back up and it never comes back up if it doesn't have good fundamentals. So there are lots of people still holding lots and lots of collectibles in the world that had great value at one point and have no value now or close to no value now. So, and the average person in this hobby is still greatly, greatly overvaluing the majority of cards in my view, because they don't understand the importance of fundamentals and they just look at prices and they think that because something's gone up that means anything in the long run. Doesn't. Prices don't really matter. What matters is the underlying asset. Lots of great comments here going back and forth on certain things. Love to see it. The old card shop asks, I've seen a nice retrace these last few weeks. How does everyone feel about that? Got some interesting answers. The old card shop says, I've been buying again. Am I a fool who is buying into a bull trap? At least you know the terminology, you understand. So you know how I feel about that, right? Like, I think that there are certain things that are coming down now because everything's coming down and there's fear. And there's certain things that are coming down that probably don't make sense to come down or come down as much. And I'm looking at those types of items to buy those types of items. And then there are lots of items that it makes perfect sense they should come down, and they're probably going to keep going down because there's no rarity, and we're just seeing the beginning of the supply. So I do think that as all these cards come back from modern and from vintage, commons, uncommons, unlimited, PSA 8s, PSA 7s, PSA 6s of every single card of every set card, you are going to see that have a global effect on the market. It's going to bring down prices everywhere. And then what you're going to see is like a K-shaped recovery type of thing where that brings prices down on everything. But once things get to a floor again, you're going to see certain items stay at that floor either forever or for a lot longer or only gradually go up. versus you're going to see other cards probably regain their price quite quickly when confidence comes back in the market, and there just are still only a few of those in the world. That's why rarity is so key. So what I would say, Old Card Shop, is I think that there's a decent case right now to be buying here and there rare items, and there's always a good case to be buying things that you love as a collector, right? As far as like when you should buy those things that you should love, probably not right now if they're not very rare items. But it's a tough decision to make. And it's also unclear when the product is going to come back from PSA and how long you might have to wait for prices to come down. So depending on the item you're looking at. All right. LK Gaming Review says, "Hi Jake, what's your opinion on Shining Legends and also alternative arts from the Sun and Moon era, as they are still as they are relatively rare? Thanks and great channel." Thank you, LK Gaming Reviews. Great questions. So yeah, let's start with Shining Legends. So a couple things about Shining Legends. Now, from a subjective side, and I think the majority of the Pokemon market agrees with this, Shining Legends is great. Those cards are great. People love the Test Tube Mewtwo. I like it, but my favorite cards from that set are it's not that card. It's just the Shining cards. I just think they're really cool. Now the issue with Shining Legends is there was a ton of it, and there is a ton of it in gem mint condition, and there are a ton of people grading those cards. It's part of why we saw Retraces and some of the prices of those after they went up so much. Those cards were selling not too far off some of the lesser Neo Destiny Shining cards, which is crazy. Okay, Neo Destiny Shining cards are extremely rare, valuable cards from an extremely rare set that was opened a long time ago that there's almost none of it left sealed. Shining Legends, there's millions of it. There's so much Shining Legends. There's still so many Shining Legend ETBs sitting around. There's so much of it unopened when you compare it to something like Neo. It would amaze you, the difference. And so the Shining Neo Destiny stuff should be way more expensive, like way more expensive than the and that over time will prove itself true, either by the Neo Destiny stuff just continuing to go up and the Shining Legends stuff holding value, or staying similar, or the Shining Legends going down. So we'll have to see how that all works out over time. The reason that hasn't really been the case is because there's so many Shining Legends cards left to be graded, whereas most, or a lot, maybe not most, but a lot of the Neo Destiny Shinings has already been graded. And so there's a lot more of that supply out in the market, so it creates this artificial environment for the time being, not artificial, but an unsustainable environment where, because most of that product isn't back yet, the supply and demand of the market makes it so that these Shining Legends cards have this pretty high price. Okay, so just be very careful, very aware of that. That's true for almost everything in Modern. That being said, Shining Legends is great. It's excellent, and I do think over the long run, that and Hidden Fates, and the Shining Fates and the whole Shining, that sort of thing, I think is going to be the things that actually last out of this period. I don't really think anything else is going to, which I know people don't like to hear, but you just have to think how many, gold, rainbow, this variation, that variation. People are going to want the new one, the most exciting one, the craziest one, and the art's probably going to get better and better, and and so people are going to just want the things that really stood out from those eras. The most of it they're not going to want. There's going to be billions and of Pokemon cards probably, in 10 to 20 years. You have to keep that in mind. And so only a very small section of all of those is going to be collectible, okay? And if something isn't collectible, it's not going to be investable. It's not going to go up. But I do think that has a good chance of making it and of being one of those things. But but at the price point that it's at, for example, and this is more of the stuff I would talk about in Patreon probably, but it doesn't make sense when you look at the numbers, right? People are investing based off of feelings and emotions. Bad, invest based on numbers and math, okay? Analytics, fundamentals. That's how you're going to do well. You're going to and this market is very irrational. Unlike this, and the stock market's very irrational too, but there's a lot of institutional investors who run everything on these, complex, amazing analytics. In Pokemon, it's mostly just everyone, running around, chicken with their head cut off, right? In Pokemon right now, it's just, whatever this YouTuber says, that YouTuber says, this is cool, that's cool. People's emotions changing left and right. I'll have a conversation one day with someone, they love a card. The next week, they heard a YouTuber say they didn't like it. Now they hate the card. It's all that sort of stuff. As far as the alternative arts from the Sun and Moon era, I don't know exactly how rare those are going to be. I don't even know offhand. Maybe I think the idea of alternative arts and them now continuing to do alternative arts and making the coolest arts in the set alternative arts could create some sort of long-term collectability for people who want the original-ish or some of the original era alternative art type full art cards. There could be something there. So, but again, everything is way overpriced from those areas right now. Those cards are probably in 10 to 15 years. That's what the prices should be if things go very well for Pokemon, in my personal view, being blunt. Okay. Chris says, hey Jake, hope you're well. If you owned a lot of base set unlimited cards in near mint condition at current prices, would you sell now and wait for it to retrace more before buying? So I try not to answer those types of questions. I will start to do that in those specific Patreon Q&A videos where it's just a little bit more private and it'll be a smaller group that I'm actually going to end up capping eventually. So as we don't affect the market or move the market too much, I can give you more of my specific opinions. Of course I don't know, right? These are all just my opinions. I'm going to give you my logic. Again, I'm a YouTuber. You shouldn't listen to me hyping or don't listen to any hype that I give one way or the other. It should be all about the fundamentals, okay, of the card, which has nothing to do with me. But I think that your question applies to some of the stuff I answered earlier about unlimited and the dangers of particularly near mint quality cards, and just there's so many childhood collections that still have 6, 7s, and 8s that people are finding and trying to figure out what to do with. Now, in the long run, I do think that those will be valuable items, hopefully. Okay. Josh Bolton says, do you feel Versus Series or Vending Series is more rare or slept on? I don't know for a fact which one's more rare, which one has more or less. My guess would be that there is more Vending Series, but I don't know that 100%. I've certainly seen a lot more Vending Series. I've seen a lot more of those unpeeled sheets, significantly more than I've seen sealed booster boxes of those Versus Series. I think you can also see the prices of the Versus Series booster boxes were always way more than the unpeeled sheets, which should also probably give you a clue about rarity. I think it's part of why Versus Series is very undervalued and was more considerably undervalued than Vending Series, even though I think both were undervalued to a certain extent as compared to certain English, particularly English Modern, but also English Vintage. I really like both. I do think that, getting PSA 10s of certain Vending Series cards is going to have good value. Versus Series is generally pretty easy to grade. But there's just not that much of that sealed product left. And it's expensive. Trombone Guy says, I broke down my thoughts and reasons and I've came up with social media, and YouTube is the biggest factor that has drove up prices. So I think that certainly YouTube and social media has driven up prices a lot, or been part of driving up prices, because it gives us a space to create a community and for us to talk to each other and get us all excited, and a place for us to show off our cards to each other, which is a whole nother reason to do this and get expensive cards and be engaged in the hobby. That being said, I think that a huge piece of what drove up prices is that people love Pokemon, and people were having tough years and wanted some nostalgia and fun in their life, and they wanted to relive their childhood. And the fact, as I always say on this channel, that 30-year-olds like to collect what they had when they were 10. So you have a certain number of collector 30-year-olds, collector types, and when they're in their 30s, they like to go back and they like to collect things and own things they had when they were kids. And it's a pattern that repeats itself in the collectible hobbies and spaces. So that's certainly part of it. The other parts are the people being inside, the stimulus checks, the unemployment checks. It was a perfect storm of sort of everything at once. And the fact that Pokemon was already considerably, in my opinion, undervalued and unnoticed. And it was sort of waiting to blow up, just not this much, without all those other things. Flippin' Eddie says, the thing that scares me is the amount of people holding Modern for the future. Just got to hope there's demand for the sets that we are holding now. Yeah, I think that, and I should make another video on Modern specifically. That the fear is that people don't. I think for me, there's just so much more of it than there is vintage stuff. That, and trophy cards in particular, and promos. Because modern promos can be quite exclusive. Modern promos can be quite a bit rarer than vintage. So when I say modern, I'm actually meaning modern set cards in most cases. Modern promos can be rarer than vintage set cards, depending on the card. So, but that is the danger. And we do have to hope that there's really high demand. And if what we could end up, and I've said this a number of times, that the hope for people who have like lots of modern sealed product or these sorts of things is that Pokemon's going to be 3 times bigger in 10 years than it is now, with 3 times more people buying and collecting. That's one thing. 2, you have to hope that they don't continue to reprint the sets. So these are the hurdles you have to jump through for it to make profit. You have to hope that they don't continue to reprint and just reprint for forever. And you might see them go to a Konami Yu-Gi-Oh model where they start just like reprinting everything always and unlimited. You just never know what they're going to do. They could reprint these sets forever if they chose. So, and if you're putting lots and lots of money, and you're buying pallets and pallets thinking it's a sure thing, it is not a sure thing by any means. You're making a large mistake. Now, you're not making a mistake to do it if you understand the risks, right? If you make the calculated decision, that isn't necessarily a mistake. But if you think that those things aren't possible, you are making a logical mistake. Okay, so yeah, so you're going to have a huge amount of demand, right? Because more and more of the supply is going to come out for the PSA cards and for the it's why I say sealed boxes is by far the best investment, because with that, as long as there aren't reprints, more of those aren't going to be made. Now, a lot more PSA cards are going to be made of Modern, and a lot more ungraded mint cards are going to be made, in the sense that a lot more product is going to be opened over the next 10 to 20 years because so much of the sealed product is left. So that's the stuff you have to be aware of and worried about, and you have to think, why would I be putting my money into things like that when there are promos, modern promos, or there are vintage set cards and trophy cards and promos and Japanese cards and all sorts of things that just have much better fundamentals and are going to almost for sure, unless demand completely dries up for that stuff and completely goes to the thing that you're buying a lot of, which I don't think there's good arguments for that. Unless that happens, you're going to be out of luck. You're either going to lose money, you're not going to make nearly as much money as you would have if you put into something that went up a lot. So. If they reprint anything like Roaring Skies, then Modern will die. Yeah, no one knows. No one knows what the Pokemon Company is going to do. I'll keep repeating that. Be careful with people telling you they know. They have no idea. Jordan Thomas has been buying a lot of sealed boxes, packs of other TCGs over the past few months, though. Invested in 14 TCGs right now so far. Laugh out loud, loving every minute of it. Yeah, I have a new obsession that's coming soon, that I'm really enjoying. So, And, I'm a collector. I love collecting. I love setting goals, achieving them. I love learning and history and learning about new things. So for me, collecting other TCGs, learning about the history of other TCGs, it's all part of what I love so much about this hobby. So that's a big part of why I do it. Although I also chose to do it this year in large part because I felt like Pokemon was so overvalued and some of these other hobbies were so undervalued relative to Pokemon, and that's ended up being right so far. Now, in the long run, I have no idea. In the long run, it might have been smarter just to put it all in Pokemon. That I don't know. In the short run, Pokemon's retraced, and a lot of these other hobbies have continued to go up for now. We'll see what happens in the long run. So you can't short-term price things like that. They don't really matter when you're sort of a longer-term investor. But it still feels good. Hey, this is what my dad always says, and we always talk about, it doesn't really matter if the market goes up or down on any given day, the stock market, but it feels better when it goes up, Gift Card Partner Solutions says, I have some sealed product, but honestly don't like collecting it versus breaking for singles. Nobody seems to talk about the huge amount of space it takes to store all those sealed boxes. Yeah, definitely an issue. Like if you're gonna store massive amounts, you need a lot of space. Jody Matoma says, if I can get my hands on a first edition MetaZoo booster box for maximum 2 times MSRP, I will happily buy one and keep it sealed. If not, I'll just forget about it entirely. Personal thoughts on that one. Yeah, it's funny. That reminds me a little of what we were talking about with the kids of like, are they just going to be like, I give up, right? Or adults in this hobby, if they can't find the product, does it make them want it more and pay more? Or does it make them say, I just give up, I'm done? So some of both. I mean, my thoughts on that is like, I definitely wouldn't pay 2 times MSRP on first edition MetaZoo Kickstarter booster box for some sort of investment. I definitely would not do that. I would try to get it at retail for the fun of opening it. Do I think that the regular non-Kickstarter first edition MetaZoo booster boxes are going to be particularly investable? They shouldn't be. At this moment, the game is nothing yet. Hasn't even launched. It's nothing right so far. So I think that in the long run it could be, but to pay that amount for something as an investment is silly. Now, I like the game. I like the art. And I love opening product, and I think it's fun that it's been successful. And I'm planning, if I can get some at retail, I'll open it and enjoy it and probably learn the game and play it. I'm all for that. And I hope it succeeds. I hope it does really well. But it doesn't make sense. And when we talk about hype, right? There are a lot of people, there were certain influencers really hyping up that product while not talking about fundamentals. They're not talking about the rarity, the supply, the popularity of the game. Unlike someone like Squeaks and Scott Pratt, who both made videos, talking about what are the fundamentals of MetaZoo today, like right this second, right? It's mostly driven up on hype and speculation for the future, and not on the actual fundamentals of that it has a huge collector base already, right? It has a rabid base of people who really love it, but will that grow? Will that sustain itself? We'll see. Now, having all that hype and having all those people push it really helps in the short run, and it gets it more exposure, so that if the fundamentals are good, people will engage in those fundamentals. It's why advertising and why branding and all this sort of stuff and is so important, because you have to get people to give your product or your asset a chance in order to know if they're going to buy it or engage in it. And MetaZoo's done a great job of that. MetaZoo partnering with Rudy is going to give them a much better chance at being successful. Huge move by them. So we'll have to see how it all goes, but certainly has a chance. I think that the cryptid element is good. It's collectible. It's diverse. You can collect cryptids from all over the world. I think the gore mixed with like the Pokemonish art is kind of cool for adults collecting they like the feeling of Pokemon, but they want a little bit like more gore, horror type themes. So, but so early, so early on that for any sort of long-term. Pokemon so early, to even be confident, although I'm a lot more confident now than I was, in the long term of Pokemon than I was a few years ago. So, even though I was very confident on it then, as compared to the vast majority of people in the space. The old car shop says, sealed is hard for people to hold. It is my firm belief that most people keep it sealed until they have a bad day and open it. I don't think there is nearly as much as people think are sealed. Yeah, hard to know. Hard to know. That's an impossible thing to know. I think that's true to some extent. I also know that there are people who have pallets and pallets just sitting on them that they plan on never opening and just keeping forever and trying to sell and make money off of. So and then the more expensive the product gets, the less people. I doubt people are opening Evolutions booster boxes in their own homes after having a bad day once that booster box got to $1,000. Now I know it's come down to $700, whatever it is now. If that comes down to maybe 300, 400 people might be opening it. But even $300 to $400, $500, $600, a lot of money when the cards inside are basically worthless or close to worthless, which they may be eventually, right? So I think that that's the type of stuff you have to be careful with. That's the type of stuff you have to be careful with those types of predictions. The faster those booster box prices rise, the less are opened. Now, I think the streaming culture is what has helped open up a lot of that product because you can sell the individual packs and people can afford to buy like one pack after a bad day, right? Or not even a bad day, but just because it's fun. Where they couldn't afford $1,000, they could afford a $50 Evolutions packs or $20, $25, $26, $38 Evolution packs, whatever it was. And a lot of it is being continuously open on those channels, but you have to understand there's so much of that product that it's hard to know, where that's all gonna end up. But I do agree, the old card shop, that I think you would agree with that. It's holding that sealed modern gives you a chance, right? That sealed modern will be very valuable. It could be extremely valuable one day. I think it's unlikely, but it could be very valuable because there's just very few of it left because it all did get opened over the years. Again, gonna be tough. Trombone Guy says, what's tough about my collecting is I like to buy and collect. I don't sell anything. So I always need money for other collections. Buying and not selling is hard financially. Sure. So I think it's why, and I'm sure there are a number of people who watch this channel who've never sold anything. And I think that this information is still very useful because it just means that you have to be more careful, right, with what you're buying and trying to wait till good times to buy things because you only have a limited amount of money from your job, so you can only put so much money into certain things. And I also think that everyone wants, when you retire someday, it'd be great to pass this, even if you're going to hold it your whole life, pass this collection on to your kids or whatever, and for it to be very valuable. That would be a great thing. So I think both of those things are the reasons why this stuff is valuable for everyone. But certainly not selling means that you have to get your money from outside. And a lot of my money does come from outside, particularly originally, until I built up a lot of stock. Now, I did sell, some this year and took took a decent amount of money outside of the hobby to just to sort of mitigate the risk. And I sold my common stuff mostly, or most of it, for that reason. But yeah, I think that ideally, particularly as a collector, you have a good paying job and you love buying, and you don't sell your collection. You buy to hold, you buy to keep, and you can also make money as an investment long term. But you have these cards because you really want them and you want them around you. That also helps everyone. Like those types of people, the fact that there are lots of those people in this hobby, including myself, makes it a stable hobby, makes it a hobby where things do go up over time, because when people buy them, they hold them. They don't want to sell them for the price that they just bought them for. They want to keep them. And they have the means to keep them because they're making money in a career, outside of Pokemon and bringing that money into Pokemon. Jacob767 once says, nearly 90% of all modern cards sell for stupidly more when graded than when not graded. Not so much for vintage cards, yeah. So two things to say about that. That is the case for certain things, and I completely agree with you. Not only is it ridiculous that there'd be a difference between the premium on modern versus vintage, but it should go the other way, because modern is generally so much easier to grade that there should be much less of a premium on any graded card. Because the reality, if you go onto eBay right now and you buy a big lot of like Shining Fates cards, they're probably all going to be 9s and 10s, unless someone damaged it, right? Because they probably just pulled it straight from a pack and put it in a sleeve. So it's all mint. Whereas you go online, getting a PSA graded vintage card, not only are you glad that it's authenticated, because there are more and more fakes starting to crop up, but it's very unlikely for those cards not to have significant scratches or significant edge wear or these types of things, much of which you won't be able to see through an eBay screen. And so having that graded card and knowing that I'm getting a 7, an 8, a 9, knowing what that means, should provide that more of that premium versus modern, where it's not really an issue. So what I will say though, Jacob, one thing to think about is that part of the reason that's true for certain cards is because the grading fees are so expensive and the modern cards are so cheap. It's part of why you shouldn't be grading those cards at all. But like there could be a $5 card and that card sells for $50 because it costs quite a bit to grade it, right? And the time and energy. And so to wait 6 months or 8 months or whatever and to spend 15, 20, 30, 40, whatever dollars the person spent to grade it, that's going to be factored into the price. And so a $50 PSA 10 version of that $5, $4 card, it's crazy in terms of you're spending 10 times more for the same card, but in terms of that percentage, but not crazy when you think of like you're paying for having a graded card. Hope that makes sense. And the fee that costs. I think it's part of why with PSA raising its prices, I think we're going to see a lot less of those cheap cards graded in general, which I think may help the value of some of that. We're going to have to see how all of that plays out, because you don't want 90% of the value being in the case and not the card. I don't think so. But that's a great point. So I apologize if I'm skipping your question. I'm just I scroll to a new spot and then grab a few, just kind of doing it randomly. What do I think the future of Japanese E-Series hollows will be? I don't know. So Japanese E-Series hollows have gone up more in value than English in a lot of cases on a percentage basis. For certain cards that I've been watching. So I don't know. I think they're great cards. It's really hard to find those booster boxes. I love Japanese. I love English. Not sure. I think E-Series in general is undervalued compared to lots of stuff in the hobby still. So, now I expect E-Series, if everything comes down like I think it might, E-Series of course will, but E-Series is one of those K-shaped. I put in that K-shaped category, recovery category. Hopefully. All of its hopes, right? But I think that they're beyond hope. They're good. There's some good fundamental reasons to believe that. Let's see what else we got here. Lots of great comments and questions and people going back and forth. I hope you guys get, guys probably get as much or more value out of this great chat than from the stuff I'm saying. This was always my dream, was to get together a group of like passionate collectors together once a week in the chat, and so it's like the same group, we know each other, and we can people can debate, people can help each other, and I'm liking to see also that it all looks very respectful and reasoned. Let's see what else we got here. Elijah Schmidt says, "Hi Jake, how do you think with the recent retrace with WotC era cards will affect the prices of EX Black and White era cards?" Very smart question. Do you think the retrace could trickle into those cards, or are they uncorrelated? Thanks. Yeah, I think very speculative, guys, right? I think that what I'm seeing and hearing from people, is that we have certain 3rd gen, 4th gen, 5th gen collectors. Obviously we're talking about 5th gen, 4th gen maybe, of some of those later areas outside of the original Nintendo EX era, which is the 3rd gen. Really wanting those cards more than Wizards of the Coast. Now, which I think is natural and normal. Now, there are a lot less of those people than there are people from my generation in the hobby wanting Wizards of the Coast, but there's a lot less of that graded right now is the key. Now, there's going to be more of it graded. Now, there may never be that much graded. There may never be, and likely, I think, there's a decent chance there won't be more than some of these WotC sets in terms of the amount graded there. So it's part of why I was buying a lot of that stuff up, because I just didn't feel like there was that much of that printed, and the pull rates in some of those cards are hard, and the grading of a lot of those cards is very difficult. All that being said, I do think that a number of those things are overvalued and are relatively overvalued, but I think they are being bought up by a lot of really passionate collectors, and I think that shows a lot of strength in those eras. I think a lot of people who are buying them are not. They're buying those things because they really want them for their collection, not because they're just moving to those things as like the thing that hasn't gone up yet to try to make money. So I like that. I feel very differently about other things that, more modern things. I don't think people are buying them for the same reasons. So, and the demographics are really good for a set like that too, because, early 20-year-olds, as they make more money, buying into that. Of course, it's the same thing with WotC. Older, 30-year-olds getting older into their 40s, into their 50s, as long as they are still interested in the hobby, will have more expendable income as well. So I think all of that's valuable. But in terms of so to go specifically to your question, in terms of the retraces in other areas affecting that, I do think it probably will have an effect. Going back to what I was saying before, I do think that almost everything falls. When major things fall, almost everything falls. It starts up a certain amount of panic and a selling off of lots of things. Even if it's slightly different collectors, it still changes the psychology. And I think in most cases, I think you probably have similar collectors for that era to the WotC era. There's probably a decent amount of overlap. So I would expect some correlation or some sort of causation, one to the other, but hard to predict exactly what. I do think that those eras have seen so much movement that I would be a little bit concerned. I have sold, a little bit into that huge increase. But I still have a lot, and I'm not selling everything because I believe in those eras long term. So it's thinning it out a little bit, selling some of my quadruples and quintuples of certain PSA cards in some cases. And I've made like 20-time returns, 40-time returns on certain cards, like unbelievable returns, particularly ones that I bought raw and graded myself. So when I get to those returns, it's time to sell at least a decent portion. It'd be really, even if I think they're going to continue to going up, it's silly to not sell into that, at least to some extent. In my view, I think that when you're really investing and you are trying to take money out of the hobby to some degree and or put it in other areas of the hobby, one good way to invest is to sell once a card has gone up a certain amount or you've made a certain percentage. At that point, let it go, because timing the market is impossible. All right. Stila Max says, do you think Amazing Rares will reach as much demand as the Shining Legends? So in demand, I'm not so sure. There's there's going to be a lot more supply of the Amazing Rares because they're a lot easier to pull. And there's probably a lot more of that product also. Maybe not that. I'm not so sure. But definitely a lot more that hasn't been opened up yet. So I don't think, even though I think the Amazing Rares are really cool, they're also not shinies, I think is another issue with them. So I think the Shining Legend shinies are better for sure, like quite a bit better. And obviously the prices reflect that. Gift Card Partner Solution says, I agree on the Shining Legends versus Neo Destiny conversation we were having earlier. However, younger collectors aren't going back in time. They're collecting what's available to them. So when we look at other hobbies, the younger collectors do go back in time as they get older and they have the money to spend. So I think this is I'm not sure exactly this is what you're arguing, but it's not an argument that's bared out in any other hobbies. If you look at sports, if you look at all these hobbies, people collect the most chased after, valuable, oldest, rarest, scarcest originals, first appearances. That's where you should put your money, guys. That's where you will do your best, okay? I feel very confident in that, and I feel very confident that kids one day will like those the most too. Now, today, I agree with you, and today, it's kind of, I think because prices have gone up so much everywhere, there's a lot of noise and there's a lot of advice saying that these modern are going to be great and this is going to be great, and so it gives people confidence to buy those things. I think that in the long run, what I say doesn't matter, what all these people say doesn't matter. What will matter is those fundamentals and history just repeating itself in this hobby, the same as these other hobbies. Okay. So I think we'll have to see. We're not going to know for a long time, but I think 10 to 20 years, you ask kids, the kids of today in 10 years, you can ask your own kids, they're gonna understand that this item over here is a special, unique, extremely rare first appearance item, of the hobby and historic to the hobby. And this item over here is readily available. They can buy tons of them on eBay still, relative to that other item, these types of things. And that's going to way offset the argument that you buy what you opened or collected as a kid. I think you do both. But I think you do both, but you don't pay a high amount for that first thing. For example, like think about you in this hobby, right? Like I think a lot of people, there's a lot of cards probably as a kid that you haven't collected or you weren't as excited to get. Part of your excitement in getting what you got was because it was expensive and because it was rare, particularly the rarest items. So, okay. The old card shop says, on the nature of reprints, most of us who have stores are only given information from our distributors, and the distributors don't tell us the whole story, as they don't even know the whole story. Yep. That's what my other friends tell me too. And they often don't know. They know like very last minute in some cases from their distributors. Like it's not like they have tons of knowledge that your average person doesn't have. Okay, Zaminator says, what's your opinion on staff cards? Good investment. So there are tons of staff cards in the hobby. There's the world staff cards. They're the pre-release type staff cards. There are all the different types of tournament staff cards. So I don't know exactly what you're asking. Maybe below you can tell me and I can say, I like them generally speaking across the board. But I like some a lot more than others. I like the Staff Worlds cards a lot more than any of the others, like much, much more. They're the fundamentals on those are so much more undervalued, even with the prices going up, than your Vivid Voltage, Evolutions, all of those staff cards. Those staff cards are way overvalued compared to those. But those staff cards, I don't think are way overvalued compared to the set cards in those sets. So, right, so there are levels to being relatively overvalued. I can tell you, if TBJ started collecting those stamped Worlds cards and started showing them in his video, game over. Or PokeRev and Leonhardt, these guys, they just have never shown them, so people don't know about them. Lots of great questions. Bird Cure for Toby, you're welcome for the content. Having some nice conversations here with people. Hey, Basic Trainer, nice to see you. Yeah, I hope so too, Basic Trainer. Basic Trainer's just saying that he hopes that people don't lose money, but it feels inevitable, and I hope that the hobby just keeps getting bigger and more collectors stay. Yeah, me too. I think as long as people also don't over leverage themselves too much, and that they take, and one thing I loved seeing all those comments on my last video, the subscriber video, it's just great seeing the 5,000 subscribers. Just great seeing everyone say like, one of the major things I learned this year about myself is just like collect what you love. Make sure you enjoy the hobby. make sure you're enjoying yourself. And I think that that's just so key. This is fun. If you're treating this just as a business and just as a way to make money, there are going to be a small percentage of people who are going to make a large amount of money, and it might be worth doing. But you can apply that to almost anything in life. Like if you're smart and dedicated and have a skill at something, you can probably make a lot of money doing a lot of different things. So, why choose Pokemon, right? So I think, and why choose something that's so unregulated and difficult to predict? So I think that having that passion and that love and joy kind of keeps you in the hobby, particularly in those ups and downs. But you do have to be careful of it, right? Because that can jump into like an addiction, right? And where I'm filling a void in my life and I'm buying these things, listen, we all have voids, and I fill voids in my life, by buying cards, but I think that there's a balance to it, right? It can be a point where you have such a void, or you're looking for you're so dependent on this that you spend yourself really into debt and you really over leverage yourselves versus you have a handle on it. So I think that's where it gets important, and where you can stomach those losses while also like remaining in the hobby and having the income to keep being engaging in the hobby. And the last thing I'll say on that is that whether you're buying cards or not, I hope you're happy to come on a channel like this and other channels, where just to hang out. You don't have to own cards. You don't have to be spending money. You can still be part of the community and love the cards. Watch the anime, play the video games. There's all sorts of ways to be involved in Pokemon or other pop culture collectibles, all of which I love. All right. Marcus Fields had just got his hands on a PSA 10 Infernape. Very cool. Ooh, you got the PSA 10 Empoleon from the Plasma Freeze set. Yeah, that's a sweet card. For a second, I thought you said the Level X. That card's really hard to find. I'm still looking for that card. But the Plasma Freeze one, love those cards. I'm such a huge fan. Not talking about investing, but just because I'm a huge collector. I just love the look of those cards. I love the gold borders of those. The Blastoise and the Charizard are sweet too. I like the which other ones are my favorites? Those might be my 3 favorites. Empoleon's really cool looking one. Felix F is asking, what webcam am I using? It's a Logitech something or other. Weird Keeper Toby says he can't wait for events to start and to get to trade and show off collections in person. Me too. I can't wait. It's looking like I may not go to Collecticon. Unfortunately, it's just going to be a little bit too hard to fit in my schedule. I really hope there's an event this summer that I can go to. Hopefully I do end up being able to go to Collecticon in Dallas, but it's looking, unfortunately, I really thought it was like 60-40 I was going to go a couple weeks ago, and now it's like 60-40 the other way, that I'm probably not going to go, because I just have too many responsibilities at the moment to even take off like that weekend. But I really, and it is a little bit far and difficult for me to get there. I actually live on an island right now, so I have to take a boat, and then I have to take so it's a little bit challenging. Watsy Fetish says, you only need a few people with money in your private chats / Patreon chats, and the market will definitely shift temporarily. I see it completely different. Yeah, I think we're gonna have to monitor that. I've criticized others for that, and I don't want to do what I don't want. So it's. We're gonna, God, the last thing I want to be is like this online guy who's like, I'm giving signals to like my buy group and they buy it, and then we all look smart because we pushed it up because we all bought it, right? So I'm going to really push like critical thinking skills, talking about fundamentals always, and not about like specific cards as much as possible, more using specific cards as examples. But it's inevitable that I'm sure, comments that we make, that I make affect the market on certain things. Def Drew says, hey Def Drew, nice to see you. Is there a market for first edition energy cards? There seems to be. I saw a bunch of like BGS like 6.5 German first edition base set energy cards selling for like 30, 40, 50 bucks. Crazy times. Those cards wouldn't have been worth those cards might have been worth like 5-10 cents a year ago. Crazy, crazy times. I think there's a certain amount of people who just really want to own like graded cards, and because grading has gotten so expensive, it's just like any graded card seems to sell for a certain amount. I don't know how long that's going to last. We'll see. But it was crazy to see that. The Truth says, it amazes me how Hollows Art from Evo is only like 80 bucks. You would think they are reprinting it or something. Yeah, so that's very high, in my opinion, $80 for that card. But yeah, but I would say buying it ungraded is a much smarter buy than buying it graded, particularly buying it in like a PSA 9. So, because most of like a lot of those ungraded ones are going to be like PSA 9, PSA 8, and you're paying like I don't even know, 200, 250, 300. I'm not sure where it's at right now. I made a video a few months before that was entitled "The Worst Purchase You Could Make in Pokemon," and it was all about the PSA 9 Evo Charizard. At the time, it was going for $1,200, and it was just unbelievably expensive. So it has come all the way down from $1,200 to $300, which is a much better price. But, whew, listen, and people love to say that I hate on that stuff because I don't have any, I'm just going to keep repeating it because I see these comments here and there. I see them on other channels sometimes because people make response videos to my videos and then people respond and they don't know what they're talking. They haven't seen my videos. Not necessarily the people making responses, although sometimes the responses are just way off aren't even what I'm saying. But some of the comments are like, yeah, he only has vintage and he's just pumping up his own cards. As I've said very explicitly, I think I have like 15 Evolutions Charizards right now at PSA that I'm hoping is going to come back before the tank, and I'm going to be selling all of them. So if I was really pumping up my cards, I'd say Evolutions, I think I would hang on just a little bit longer until I can sell out of my position. But I don't ever put my own money over the channel, over like the things that I tell you guys. So it is a conflict of interest because I do hope the prices stay up for me so I can sell them for a higher amount, but it is what it is. Matthew S. says, are you holding PSA 10 cards? I feel like it's going to be a lot harder to get a 10 in the future, which will make them more valuable. Yeah, I've been selling, like I sold some level X's recently. I sold some more Masaki's recently, and I'll go over more of this in Patreon, specifically why I'm selling and what I'm selling what, but yeah, not 10s. Trying to hold the 10s. I think I've sold like 1 or 2 10s because I got offered really huge values, and there's a price on everything. Other than my childhood cards, there's pretty much a price on anything. It just has to be an extremely high price on certain things. GeorgeBot says, Pokenomics, do you not think that sealed modern will disappear at a fast rate due to the pack opening channels? I do. I think the pack opening channels are sealed collectors' best friends, are the modern sealed collectors' best friends. I think if it wasn't for those pack opening channels, you would be in trouble. The old card chart says, people are very concerned with safe investing. Why are these people investing in cardboard? Well, I think that collectibles have a good history of maintaining and holding value, particularly once becoming more established. And I think that there are elements within the Pokemon hobby that seem to be pointing that way. So I think that there's some good upside in investing in Pokemon, but I definitely would be very careful. I think that investing, not a financial advisor here, but I think that investing money in, S&P 500 index fund, blue chip, type large, S&P 500, any one of the top maybe 10 to 20 companies in the world, sorry, or in the world or in the US in the S&P 500, are all good options. And some will pay you a dividend, some will not, depending on the company. But either way, I think that it's just much safer. It's a much safer, more sustainable way to make sure that you'll build wealth over time. That being said, it's not necessarily as fun and exciting, and there's a lot of that get rich quick mentality in something like this, where it's like, well, I can make this much money this quickly, versus in the stock market I'm only making 6, 8, maybe 8%, maybe 9% every year on average, with some years I'm losing 20 to 30%, and then with inflation it's like maybe 8 7%. Some, depends on what type of things you're investing in. And there's no completely safe investment. I also think that people, just my personal opinion, I think that people, there's this idea that like the U.S. can't fail, that the U.S. economy, and that U.S. stocks and the biggest U.S. companies will always be the biggest, will always be the same. When you looked like 20, 30 years ago, that most of the biggest companies in the world were Japanese companies, and then Japan really went on the downfall, the downturn economically. Now, do I see that happening for the U.S.? No, but anytime soon, no. But you just never know. So you just have to be careful. There's no sure thing in investing. There's no sure things in any of this sort of stuff. But there are things that make a lot more sense and are less risky or more risky. And one great way to hedge is to be diversified, right? So have a lot of different things. Put a lot of money in a lot of different things. And make sure you enjoy the things and enjoy your life. And money is not the most important thing. Money is a very important thing and a very useful tool, and something that can provide a lot of freedom and comfort and safety, both real and psychological, in life. Where you deploy your money and what you choose to spend it on, what you choose to do with it, and how you choose to help your family, and these other things, that's where a lot of the meaning for money comes from, and the importance of money comes from. The why you're making a lot of money, the why you're trying to make money, and where you're going to use it for, and how are you going to incorporate it and put it into your life in a real way, instead of just kind of like hoarding it or amassing it for its own sake. Josh Bolton says, strictly speaking art-wise, not taking into account price or rarity, what are your favorite Raichu, Moltres, Mewtwo, and Alakazam cards? Gosh, okay, let's go Skyridge, Moltres. Skyridge and Vending Series. I really like the Vending Series era Moltres. That's a sweet Moltres. Mewtwo. Huh. I don't know. I have to think about it for a while. I guess I would say, not necessarily the art, but the overall card. I really like the Legendary Collection card. I also love that card art was designed or drawn or whatever by Christopher Rush from the Magic world. I just think that's cool. The same person who designed the Black Lotus. And I like the Legendary Collection version of that art. So the reverse Mewtwo from that. I like the Mewtwo from the 1997 card set. Generally the E-Series Mewtwo's, like the Expedition Mewtwo. Often the E-Series cards are like the best art, I think, of certain cards in the hobby. So those are all probably some of my favorites. Alakazam, probably going to go. I really like the Masaki Alakazam. Let's say that. And Raichu. Raichu doesn't get like a lot of great arts. I wish Raichu had There's something about Raichu cards that I tend not to think are that great. It's funny. Because, like, even the E-Series, like the Skyridge Raichu, it's okay. It's definitely not one of the better ones. I don't know. What's a good Raichu, guys? Maybe I'll just go with base set for that one. I'm not sure. There's probably some good Raichus. Like I'm trying to think of, like, in the Nintendo EX era, if I liked any of those. I feel like there might be a decent one, like a regular holo, or even in like the Diamond and Pearl era. Yeah, I feel like Raichu needs a cool card. Raichu doesn't get enough love. It's the evolved form of Pikachu, and yet Raichu doesn't have that much collector value. And there's something weird about it, right? Like, I've always, either they're not like executing those cards well, they haven't like made it cool enough with like enough crazy lightning. Like, I feel like it deserves like a really cool card. I don't know. The old card shop says, why do people pay $700 for Tesla stock when it's worth like half that at best? Blitzray says, Pokenomics, stop recommending more TCGs. Last time the Mega Man, once you tried to buy it. So what I will say is, like, Hillside Gaming, always check that. There are a number of like good places, not affiliated with them at all, that you can tend to get some of these like dead CCGs, dead CCGs cheaper than eBay prices. So you always want to do your research and check around before just buying off of eBay. Sometimes eBay is a lot more expensive. You know, I'm very bargainy. I love the hunting for bargains and the thriftiness around finding bargains. It's all part of the fun and the chase for me. So I enjoy like knowing all the different places to go look, and that would be a good video, right? Where I like detail all of the places that I look for Pokemon cards, and you know, that would actually be super useful to people. I don't know. It's like, do I want to give all that info up? That's how you know, the thought I always have in my head is like, I've worked hard to like have that info, and if I give that to a bunch of people, they're just gonna start buying out from that place and they'll be gone. Yeah, I think it's part of why I like doing it in these live chats, because I feel like not that many people make it to this point, and the people who make it like are probably like the core people here, and so I'm happy to give them sort of that info. And likely are not going to be the more like scalpery types, because they're the people who, you know, I hopefully this channel has quite a bit of like heart in it, and love of collecting, and I've made a lot of like negative videos against, you know, people taking advantage of people. So hopefully those types of people kind of steer a little bit away from the channel. My goal is definitely to help collectors who want to be here for the long run. That's my main focus, is how to help those guys. All right, so we've got about 6 or so minutes left. I am going to jump to the bottom of the chat. I know I'm way behind. If someone wants to throw in questions at the bottom, happy to answer a couple. As always, appreciate all the questions, everyone hanging out. I know I miss like probably 100, like 30 to 40 questions every week because I give long answers. But again, you know, if you can afford it, you can do the Patreon. Send me questions. I'm gonna do those different tiers. We're gonna do the consulting tier. We're gonna try it. We're gonna see how it goes. I'm not sure, and we're gonna do that monthly Q&A, which is gonna be a smaller group where you're, you know, a lot more likely to have your question answered, and we'll kind of keep going, I think, until everyone at least has one question answered or feels like they got what they need. All right, so Will Max says, what are your opinions on the new Digimon TCG? So I have not. Right now I'm actually going into Yu-Gi-Oh, and I'm trying to learn Yu-Gi-Oh right now. Digimon I don't know too much about, so I'm not going to speak on it too much. I have some friends who are very into it. Seems to be quite a bit of buzz and popularity. It seems to be doing very well so far, so it's exciting. It's exciting. I did like Digimon as a kid. It was definitely not. It was not nearly as high as Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, and DBZ. So it's a little bit further down for me in terms of just my own personal appreciation. So. Let's see what else we got here. You are average player since I'm trying to collect a master set of Vivid. How do you think it will do? Uh, Probably not the best investment, but maybe could be worth something at some point. I don't know. I've talked quite a bit about Modern today. I think you should collect what you love and enjoy. If you really like the Vivid set, go for it. Absolutely. I think being financially prudent and careful, you probably don't want to open up the entire set unless that's really important to you as a collector. I think some collectors want to open all their cards, and I'm 100% in support of that, as long as they're aware that that's going to cost them quite a bit more money, and they're fine with doing that. Generally, if you're building a master set, it's best to maybe open one booster box to try and get a lot of it, and then you want to buy the other cards. Now, if you're including reverses and different things in your master sets, that's where it becomes really challenging to track all those down and can become rather expensive to find them. Clayton Clay says, hello, how can I bargain for XY Evos? And what is price if it's too low for it? Hello, how far can I bargain for XY Evos? Okay. Well, so I'm not exactly sure. So XY is coming down in price right now. Will it continue to come down in price? I don't know. Will there be a little bit of a bull trap? That I would probably call a bull trap. I do think that there is a bull trap happening for some people who continue to buy it. Every day, multiple of those booster boxes are continuing to sell on eBay all day, every day. We'll see what happens. I do think it's more of a buyer's market than it was, but I still see it. There's a lot of buyers for Evo, and there are a lot of sellers for Evo. Before, there were more buyers than sellers. That's why the price went up so much in such a short amount of time. There was just so ravenous hunger in the buyer pool. All of a sudden, Evolutions became the thing to buy, the most important thing to buy. Yeah, we'll have to see. We'll have to see how that goes. So I do think you can negotiate a little bit more now than you could. You can probably get it for cheaper. I wouldn't be shocked if you could buy a few boxes from someone for like $600 a box right now. You could probably get it that cheap, depending on the person, particularly off of eBay. You can definitely get it for that cheap, particularly if you bought a few of them. So you could probably even get it maybe in the 500s if you bought like a case, if you have the money, if you really like Evolutions and you think it's going to go up in the long run. So particularly off of eBay, where you save the seller 10% in fees. Ooh, Daniel says Dark Raichu is the best Raichu art. Good call. Yeah, Dark Raichu from Team Rocket. That's a good call. Very good call. I forgot about that one. First ever English secret rare, guys. The old card shop says, I'm curious why there is so much hate keeping about whether people are true collectors or investors. Who cares? I think that it's not hate, at least for me. It's more about, I think other people hate. I think for me, it's more about the hobby, in order for it to be, first of all, I'm a collector and I like to talk about and hang out with people who are passionate about the cards and are not just passionate about money. So for me, I enjoy collectors more than I just enjoy people who are purely in it for a business and don't care about the cards at all. I don't really get a lot of enjoyment from them. So there's that piece. So I prefer to help people and share my knowledge and all my skills with the people that I get something from or enjoy and I feel like are part of the community. Second thing is that I think that it's collectors that are going to sustain the hobby and are going to make everything valuable for everyone. If the hobby is filled with just businesses and speculators, it's very unstable and not sustainable. So you need people who want the cards because they love them and enjoy them, and not just to resell them later in order to build up the hobby. So that's where I come from, in that I do think that you are certainly seeing questionable businesses and questionable scalpers, and I certainly care when I see people. And I don't think you're saying any of this, the old card shop, but I certainly I'm very skeptical of, skeptical is not even the right word, but I'm sickened by some of the things that I see, just in terms of the predatory, telling people telling people that something's a good investment, telling people that it's a sure thing, and then selling them that thing, right? Doing these kind of intense sales tactics to get people to buy something that maybe they shouldn't, telling people to buy on credit to leverage themselves in order to buy things. I see videos like that and people saying that. So that's the stuff I care about. In terms of like morally being a business or a seller of something, of course I have zero problem with that. I think when you sell something, you don't have to have a passion for it. You don't have to care about it. You can just sell it. You can just see that it's a good business. That doesn't make me happy, right? At the same time, like those people are not my people, we could say, in the hobby, or the people that I'm going to get along the best with. But I don't know, an issue with those people, right? I do think though, if the hobby's built up of just that or too much of that, and there's too much competition in that area and not enough people buying from them, it can have negative overall effects on the hobby. SteelMX says, would you bring in Sasha T for an interview? Yeah, that'd be fun to talk about sports cards one week. I definitely would. If you want to reach out to Sasha T and tell him to come on my channel, please do. Gift Card Partner Solution says, what should I do with my Harry Potter cards? Well, it depends if you enjoy them or not. If you enjoy them, keep them. If you don't enjoy them, you know, they've gone up a lot in value. It's probably a decent time to sell. You shouldn't hold on to things that you don't get pleasure from or enjoy. Could they go up in value over time? They could. Could they go down in value? They could. You know, I think it's perfectly fine time to sell. I think, you know, they were very undervalued, I felt 6 months ago. Now I don't think that they're as undervalued. All right, so it's 5:02 right now. Fiazar says, hello, JK Jake. A seller wants $14,000 for a 2008 World Promo set from staff to finalist. Do you think it's too high? My goal is to resell in a few years for a profit. He's asking the same for 2010. So that's a Patreon type of question. That's actually like a consulting type of question to really go into specifics about a specific deal you're working on. I don't think you want me to tell everyone here anyway. All right. Okay, so I am going to end it today. Oh, and just for the record, the old card shop says that he didn't think that I was hating on business. Yeah, I find myself somewhere in the middle, right? I think in the investment area of the hobby, I tend to be more like we should be concerned about the buying and selling practices than maybe your average person. But I think in the whole hobby, I'm pretty neutral in terms of my views, because obviously like there's the whole just collector player side of the hobby. Then I think there's a lot of irrational anger and hatred and negativity towards certain people in the hobby that don't deserve it, and are just trying to make a living in a business and aren't doing predatory practices. Then I think that there are people that are doing predatory practices, that are taking advantage, that are, you know, taking way more than they need, are being greedy. I think all that's happening too, and those people are frustrating for everyone. So that, you know, that's my take for sure. All right, guys. So thank you all so much for hanging out today. It was a real pleasure having you all. We will be back next Sunday, and then we'll have more information. So we'll announce the giveaway, I guess the giveaway winner, next Sunday. So if you want to be entered into that giveaway, you can take a second to go to my previous video, the giveaway video. Just listen to the instructions, make a comment in the video if you'd like to win the contents of those Shining Fates polls that we pulled. And otherwise, it's real pleasure hanging out with you guys. You guys are the best. So much knowledge in the chat. Again, sort of my dream of having a channel where there's just great conversation and knowledge from everyone, and we're all sort of sharing our info. That's my goal. So I'm happy we have that here, and yeah, it's been real fun. I missed it these last 2 weeks. I've really missed it. So it's been fun hanging out with you and being back. So I will see you all again. Yeah, next Sunday, and I have some really cool interviews for this week. I have an interview I'm excited about from someone who's not in this hobby, from a different hobby, from a card hobby, that I think will be great. I do want to start doing more content on some other TCGs and CCGs occasionally, just kind of like overview videos, because I think that, one, I bet there's some crossover between Pokemon collectors and these other sorts of things. I know I love collecting all this stuff. And two, I think it's really interesting to hear the perspective of other people from these markets, and will be really valuable for those who really want to absorb the most useful information as possible and aren't just looking for like those short answers on what to buy, which I think this channel is mostly made up of. You know, the people who aren't just looking for those short answers. So thanks again, and I will see you all next week. Take care.